Welcome, everyone. Hopefully you are seeing the PowerPoint slide. So is that an agreement? Anyone give me a thumbs up that they are seeing the PowerPoint? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, now that you switched it, it's the right view.
I don't like that default, and I have to do that every time I have to Zoom in a student in class. So welcome. I'm Patricia Marsh. I'm the department chair for the Psychology BA program. And when I volunteered to do a workshop, faculty workshop, I wanted to basically talk about Zipgrade as a program and software to give faculty a little bit more exposure to it. And then I was asked to put an assessment piece. I have it in the PowerPoint slide. I don't know if we'll get to it within the 1 hour, so it is available when the PowerPoint gets shared out. Informally, I kind of asked if people had ever worked with Scantron or bubble sheet formats in the past. Most haven't. A few that have used the older method. When I had last taught at Park University, which is over a decade ago now, I had a colleague who basically came across Zipgrade. He was talking with me about it, that basically he just uses his smartphone to grade the bubble sheets for the different tests and assessments that he had in his classes. And then I went off to be a senior data analyst for 5 years and didn't use the technology. So when I got hired here in the fall of 2021 and started to have different classes and larger class sizes with 50 students in it, I remembered that from that software from 5 years ago. And so since I've been here at OUAZ, I've been using Zipgrade to primarily do the midterms and final exams in my different classes. And this calendar year, starting to use it a little bit more for that assessment piece. So that way I can see across multiple classes and across multiple years, because it took me a couple years before I had larger sample sizes to look at more systematically for assessment purposes. All right, so a little bit of the recap that was in the flyer for this presentation. Here's the link to Zipgrade. You can click on it. I'll have screenshots of what different pages in the software look like. The front page, if you scroll down, they have a little 4-minute tutorial that's, I think, on the free version of this, that you basically can print off their generic bubble sheets, have your students write their names on it and scan it immediately. What I'm going to be showing you today is if you actually purchase a membership, you get to customize a lot of things, which allows you to do things like upload an Excel file or a CSV file. So that way you can have your students' names already typed, their ID numbers already uploaded. And that way when they do the different assessments, that information is already linked together. Whereas the free version, or at least watching that video, I have to interpret my students' handwriting. It's not going to alphabetize it easily. It's going to make it a little bit more challenging to then put it into the grade book that I've downloaded from Blackboard. So the membership is $6.99 a year. And to me, it's the best investment of any teaching software that I've encountered in my career. So some of the objectives, hopefully, that you will acquire with this workshop is seeing how you would access that software if you had that membership, to see some of the extra features, walking through stages of how to set up a class, how to upload a class roster into the Zipgrade system, how to look at item analysis, which is the primary reason, besides making it easier to grade. I'm a data analytic person by training, and I want to see, well, how do my students do on each of the questions? And that's what item analysis will give me is, okay, here's the correct answer. Well, how did my students answer on all of the response options? That way I can quickly identify problems. That might be an error. I keyed the wrong answer. It could be because of lectures, class activities, students just gravitated, or a portion of those students gravitated to the same incorrect response. So I want to take a look at that. And so that data just gives me a better way of fine-tuning my formative and summative assessments within my classes, which has been very helpful here because, for example, general psychology, I've been teaching that for decades at different institutions, and I had to do a lot more adjustments here than I've had to do in the past. And instead of just relying on my own experience and what I was seeing in the students, I wanted some data to help me with those adjustments that I did in the different tests. And the item analysis feature in this made it so much easier to do that. But also if, say, you keyed something wrong, or you want to give students credits, like, okay, the correct answer was C, but 40% of my students picked D. I want to give a point back to everybody who put D on that particular question, and I don't want to do that by hand. I don't want to have to kind of flip through each of my tests to figure out, okay, who did, answered D on question number 5. What this program will allow you to do is go exactly to question number 5, add in a second option. You could give it half points, you could give it full points, and it will completely regrade all of the tests for you. And so you can download a new Excel file with those points. So again, this is a nice tool when you especially have larger classes. All right, also some descriptive statistics, looking to see the range, basically who got the highest and lowest scores on your particular tests or assessments. What's the average, what's the median, especially for someone who teaches statistics. If my average and median are very different from each other, I've got some skewedness going on in the classroom in terms of the performance. I want to take a particular deeper dive into my assessment. And then if we have time, getting at how to create an assessment tag. So basically going into certain items across your assessments in that class in order to put in a very specific phrase or word. Like, for example, when I teach statistics, can students recognize the correct statistical test they should be using per scenario? That is a learning goal that I would like students to leave statistics with, and that's what I've started to assess now that I've taught our math stats twice at this campus, to see, are students really getting it? What do I need to do to enhance that? So I'm taking my own baby steps for using Zipgrade for assessment purposes. All right, so nuts and bolts of the program. You go to the website. There are steps there if you want to set up an account, whether that's paid or free. And this is a screenshot of what that first page looks like. There's additional resources if you scroll down on that page. Today's presentation, as I mentioned, is much more focused on the advanced features that you don't see in those free tutorials. So that way, if you do want to explore it a little bit more, this PowerPoint workshop presentation will hopefully give you some idea of what those different screens and bells and whistles look like. Okay, you get to assign what email address you want connected to your account. Since, again, plan to be here for a while, I basically put in my Ottawa email, but you can use any email that you want. So if you want your personal email, you could do that as well. So it's not really connecting to anything at Ottawa, but this reminds me, I was at Ottawa, I'm creating stuff for that institution, because I do know some of our, for example, adjuncts, other faculty might be teaching in other places. Okay. So when you do log in, and again, this menu or first screen or main page, I'm assuming is what you would see with the paid version. I don't know what the free version looks like. The numbers at the top are kind of the order that those different menu options will be covered in this PowerPoint presentation. Again, number 5 is kind of ambitious of how I'll actually get to that, but it is there. I do have screenshots for that. But I guess the order that I wanted to is practically like, how do I use this? If I'm going to create a test in Word, I'm going to print out, make copies for them to take it in class, then how do I use Zipgrade in that process? And so that's the rationale for the order of covering these menu options. So, setting up your class, setting up your roster, and eventually customizing your answer sheet or bubble sheet for your exam. So it all starts with creating what I call the Zipgrade roster. It's just an Excel file. You'll change the file format when you're actually ready to save it and upload it into Zipgrade. And these are recommended headers. They're not required. It's just when you get into the software, it's going to ask you to map these column headings to the fields that are in Zipgrade. So I basically just use the names of the fields that Zipgrade does. So they're going to have a field that says last name. So if you have a column for the student's last name, their first name, their Ottawa student ID, and then assigning a unique code for your class. And I'll show that on the next slide. But that's it. So I usually get my class list from my Ottawa. I go in, pull up my class, download the class list, and then from there, set up separate columns for last name and first name for my students, and the ID is already a separate column. And then I just copy and paste the columns I need into a new Excel file, save it as a .csv, and then I can easily upload it into Zipgrade. Now, what I found, and it's my little lessons learned in the gray box is showing, is it took me a couple semesters to figure out a naming convention that one I could remember consistently, that would work when I have multiple different sections of the same course in the same semester or the same year. And so this is a format that I've developed. Zipgrade allows you basically to use any format that you want in terms of labeling your classes. But I knew I was going to use this for every class, for every test across multiple semesters, if not multiple years. So the convention that I've been using for the last 2 years is I start with the course, I put in the year, I put in the section, and today I just added workshops. So some of the screenshots include like a roster that I created just for this presentation. So that way I'm not using any real student names. At the bottom are typical ways that I've labeled things. So it's the same class, except one of the assessments or exams that I'm going to do is the midterm and one's the final. So I just add the assessment name at the end. So I keep the formatting the same up front, and that just saves me time and coordinating, linking data together in Zipgrade. So that's something I strongly recommend, that you have a naming system and you stick with it. So that way you don't accidentally intermix different classes or different sections. What is the bottom is kind of an example of what I'm going to do this coming, hopefully in fall, next fall. I'm wanting to embed some pre and post assessments into the statistics class that I teach. But I'm also going to have the midterm and final for that class. So I wanted an acronym for the assessment that I'm using. That's what RMS is standing for. I wanted to indicate my first and my second measures of it. For those who are curious, RMS is basically research method statistics. It's an assessment I created at other institutions that I've been slowly integrating it here. Okay, so here is an example of that kind of Zipgrade roster file. I've got the last name, first name, student ID, and then the class code that I'm going to create. So you basically just replicate, copy, and paste that code down for each student. That way, when you upload your file, it's got each student connected to that class and their ID number. And again, none of these names are actual student names, so I'm keeping that protected. So when you are in the Zipgrade program and you're ready to set up your class in there, you go to the class menu, you see this next screen, you're clicking on add a new class, and then it's going to ask you for a class name. And again, it doesn't really give you any examples or prompts, and I recommend that whatever the code you used in your Excel file for your class is the same one that you use here. And again, it's not going to automatically link things up until you do it. And so you're going to have to remember what you named or labeled things as. So consistency will definitely help you out. I didn't do that when I was first learning, and then it took me much longer to link my students with my classes if the naming convention was just even a little bit different. Once you click OK. Then I tend to scroll down the list because it'll bring me back to the main class menu to just make sure, yes, my class got created there. Because again, human error, I might have not clicked the right button. And so I like to be able to see confirmations, any kind of training user guide. I'm always looking for that. It's like, okay, I messed up. What should I see if I've been successful? So if you're successful, you should be able to see the course that you created. And Zipgrade has little things like its roster. Right now, it's not showing any students because I've not uploaded my students. But you see the tag reports. So once you actually connect tags, you can see which courses or which classes you have that have assessment tags in them. So now I'm ready to import my students. That's why I recommend doing the Excel file first before setting up your class in Zipgrade, because that way you're not popping in and out of Zipgrade as you're doing your processes. So you click on students. You click on the import student from CSV, and it's going to give you this little lovely page. You click on choose file, pull up your file. Because you've embedded those headers, make sure you check the box that says, yes, I do have a header row in what I'm uploading, and click upload. And you will get into this import student screen. And I mentioned before, it's got set fields, and that's what these 3 yellow highlighted areas are. And it's going to ask you in your data file, what is the name that's associated with the student's first name? And so I like simplicity. So I named the column name the same name as the field used in Zipgrade. So I use my drop down, and it will list all of these variables that are in my file that I've uploaded, and I just select first name. The second one, I select last name. And the third one, I select student ID or whatever I called it. Not sure what external reference is. I've not used it, so I can't comment on that. But at the bottom, when it says class options, you basically want to place these imported students into an existing class. When it's the first time that you're uploading or creating a class and uploading a set of students, it's not an issue. But when you start to see students in a second class, or they're repeating one of your classes, then you're going to start to have students that are new to the system, as well as those that have already been imported for another class. And so the system's going to ask you, well, do we want to ignore these students? Do we want to still include them? And so whether it's a brand new class or a class in which I have repeated students in, I'm always using the option of place students into an existing class. That way I always have the same head count that are going into the class I just set up. Otherwise, it will only import the new students and it won't import the duplicate students. And so it took me a little trial and error to figure out, well, how can I always get my full set of students? And so this is mapping out how to have that consistently work out successfully. And so once you select place students into existing class, you're going to get this new menu that's going to pop up that says class, existing class, and then it'll give you a drop down, and then you can pick, well, which existing class is it? And again, when you've only created 1 or 2 classes, the list is really short. I've been using this for almost 4 years here, and I have a very, very long list of very similarly named courses. So my naming convention has actually made it easier to find that existing class. I'm always a proponent of don't fully trust technology, double check. So I go back to the class menu option. I scroll down to find that class I just added, and I want to make sure that I have 5 students. So that file that I imported had 5 different students. Well, I want to make sure it's also displaying here, because if it's displaying a smaller number, then I basically excluded students who are taking me for a second, third, or fourth time. But it checks out. I can move to the next stage. And that's to identify an answer sheet. Now, looking at the free video, for the free choice, you can pick their defaults. I'm always customizing because that way I can have the students' names and ID numbers connected to whatever performance that they're doing. But both options are viable. I'm just going to show how to use the custom wizard. And there, I'm going to select a new answer sheet. Again, you get to create your own naming convention, and this is where I recommend using the same format for the class. And then just as a dash or underscore, put the name of the assessment that you're doing right after it. So that way you can just easily identify the class and what assessment you're looking at. So in this case, if I was doing it for the workshop, I might add at the end of my name of my class, midterm, because I'm typically doing midterm or final. Then it's going to give you a series of steps to do, and this is where you can further customize that answer sheet. The default fields that they print on the bubble sheet are name, quiz, and class. I really don't need quiz and class listed because this unique code that I've set up is going to appear on the answer sheet. So really all I need for my students to do is write their name and then put today's date. So that way I've got dates on the Scantrons. Otherwise it's just the name and the course. I could probably backtrack as to what date it was. Again, I created this date parentheses mm/dd/yy. You could type in anything that you want and it will actually keep a memory of it. So each time I go back in to create a new answer key, I uncheck these two boxes, check this one, and put my cursor in this field, and it automatically pops up things I have typed in the past. So I like it that it keeps that memory. This screen is basically asking you to, again, further customize it. Well, OUAZ has a 6-digit student ID code, so I changed that number to 6. You could change what it appears for the bubble sheet. I just leave the default of student ID. It's asking for the letter of the key version. This is usually if you're going to have one or more versions of a test. Because of my class sizes, I have 2 different exam formats with 2 different keys to reduce the likelihood of cheating. And so I tend to reduce these letters just down to A or B. My smaller classes that have like only 10 students, or I've got 12 students, but I'm in a room with 30, I could spread them out. Then I may just have one test version, so I just have the letter A. So everybody, Scantron just says letter A. And then the bottom here is what do you want to call it to remind students to fill it out. So here's an example of what one of my typical bubble sheets will look like. I've got 6 digits, I've got 2 forms, and I call it exam letter because that's what I print in the Word file. I say at the top, your exam letter is A or B. In some cases, I've done 3 different versions. If behavior on the midterm showed that there's some questionable looking at their teammates' papers a couple of tables ahead of them. So I've had to institute 3 different versions. So sometimes rarely I'll have an A, B, and C and have the 3 different versions of the test. But I could see if for some of my colleagues that have like 90 people in the class, they may actually want 4 different versions of the test. The next one, you can have things customized, like you could have true, false options being T and F. I found that was a lot more work than just picking add multiple choice and just had everything on my Word file be A, B, C, D, E. And so even my true, false has options A and B. That way it was just quicker to create the bubble sheet for it. So I click add multiple questions. I get to the next screen. I do my drop down just for numbers of questions, and a lot of my tests have 53 questions. So I drop that down, scroll down to the number because it's a drop down of numbers 1 through 100. So you can pick, well, which number of questions is going to be on your answer sheet. And then the bottom here, the defaults, it gives 5 options. Some of you may have tests in which you might go up to options F and G. You can add up to 10 different letters. I just don't do that to my students. I do harder questions in other ways. And this is the last page before it's finalized, which I really like because I can preview it. Did I miss something? Like, oh, I really wanted another field in here. Or really, I wanted, instead of just student ID, I really wanted to say, oh, you student ID. Did it put the correct customization of the right course in here? Did it put all 53 questions in there? Because if it didn't, you can go back and fix those things. But as soon as you hit publish, which is a button at the bottom of that page, it finalizes it as a PDF. So if you messed up after publishing, then you kind of have to create the whole thing all over again. It will give you this confirmation page saying custom answer sheet has been published. Scroll down, because again, if you have more classes, you may have to do more scrolling. And you find your class, you find the customized test, and it will give it a unique number. Sometimes you can find things by date that might be a little quicker. And it gives you a PDF button. As you click on that, it displays it. That's what the full Scantron is, or bubble sheet is going to look like. You can download it. You can go make as many copies as you need. You don't need special paper. Copy paper, plain paper is perfectly fine. If you wanted to do it on other quality types of paper, you could do that as well. It's just a simple download and print. Okay. So I just wanted to stop there to see if anyone had questions about doing a class roster, uploading it, setting up a class in Zipgrade. Okay. Again, this is probably a little bit more technical than interactive for some of the other workshops. So hopefully, again, feel free to go to some of the other ones.
Patricia, I just
yeah.
want to say that's awesome. That's exactly the tool I was looking for 11, 12 years ago, and it had not been invented yet. So I'm going to try to put that in action.
Yeah, I left Park University in 2016, and that's when my colleague had said, hey, I came across this thing. We had lunch. He was showing me on the phone. And then I took a non-academic or a non-teaching position for 5 years. And then I just remembered that tool, and it looked so amazing. And then it took me like a year here of just trial and error trying to figure it out. Because at the time, no one had at the OUAZ campus had heard of that or worked with it. So you're getting a lot of my lessons learned in this presentation. So as well as me being a continued resource. Robert?
Yeah, get a little bit more technical with me. So you fill this out, so then it generates answer sheets for you that you give to the students, and they bubble in the answers. How does that all work? And then how is it scanned? I don't understand that yet. When I did the bubble sheets before, you just collect them at the end, you take them to the IT department, they put them through a machine, and it comes out with the answers and all of those things that you're talking about. So how does this work?
Those are my next slides.
Okay. All right. Good. Perfect.
Okay. Continue sharing. Oh, it didn't go back to where I was at. I'll fix that. All right. Hopefully you are all seeing the grading, scanning, and completing answer sheets slide. So this is to me, this was the amazing part that sold me on this software that I remembered for 5 years before I actually used it. You do need to download the Zipgrade app onto your smartphone, and eventually setting up the answer key, which you can do on the computer companion. So I can use my regular computer. I could also do it on the phone, but then I have to individually scroll and identify answers to each question. I found doing it on my desktop was so much easier. And once you have the answer key coded to the sheet that you just created, literally you are using your phone. So you turn on the app, and this is what it's going, your app will give you a list of items, and one of them is is to scan papers. And as soon as you click on scan papers, your smartphone turns into kind of a camera. It gives you these 4 little boxes. And what you're to do with your phone is line up the image. So that way the black squares in each of the corners line up with each of those photo squares. And as soon as it does that, my phone is making a click. The website says that your phone would vibrate, but once that kind of picture is taken, it has been graded. That's how quickly it grades. Is you line bubbles, and then what it will do is give you a small little report for that student. So it'll display how many points they got, what percentage that's in there. Now, this screenshot is from Zipgrade's website, so I'm not violating whoever Lando is on this, but a lot of times I will tell my students, do you want to know your score now or do you want to know it later? And if they want to know it now, again, I use the scan paper feature. I scan it, and then I bring them close to me and I show them on my phone. This is how many points you have, or this is the percentage that you earned on this assessment. For a lot of them, they're like, no, I'll wait until Blackboard. That's perfectly fine. So basically, you can show them in real time, or you can just collect it, and then back in your office, you can get them scanned in like 2 minutes. It's a very quick way of grading. The app also has features like you can edit the key on the fly. Like if a student asks a question during the test, and you're like, wait a minute, that is the right answer, but I keyed the wrong one. You could fix it in the app and it would regrade everything, as well as the new keys or the new answer keys to come along. You can also review a paper, and that will actually pull up the student's full scanned answer sheet with the answers coded as green and red to indicate, well, which ones they got incorrect and which ones they got correct. And I found that tool very helpful when I do one-on-ones with students to see their pattern. Like, was there a block of questions that they just didn't answer correctly? Or was it sporadic? So that way we can go back to see, well, is it true, false? Is it the matching? What kinds of questions are you dealing or you're struggling with? Was it a particular chapter? So that feature on the app on the phone made it much, much easier to have those one-on-one sessions. It does the item analysis. The nice thing I like about the app is it does it in color form. This is also on the computer, but the computer is all numbers. And I like the visual. So this way I can see for question number 1, 69% of the students answered it correctly. Answer E was the correct one. I see it in green. And then this is giving me counts, whereas the desktop companion will give me percentages. But that way I can look at the distribution of those who did not get the question right and where that is at. And sometimes one of these options will be a really high red bar, indicating a higher proportion of the students all selected that one. I go back to my printed out test, or I go back to my Word file and I go look at the actual question and the response option to see, did I make too good of a distractor? And so I might recredit students back that question and then change the question before I teach that class again. Or do I look at it like, no, that's a completely wrong answer. I'm not going to change it, but it definitely fooled students, or at least maybe ones that were not as prepared for that particular question. The app also gives you summary statistics or descriptive statistics. That way I can see overall for the test, before I go back to my computer and download the data, how did students do? What was the range? That's why when I talk with my colleagues, it's like, okay, how did your students do on your midterm exam? Well, it's like, well, the average was pretty good. I had an average of 70, but in this particular case, my students ranged from 10 to 48 points on a 50-point midterm. The 10 is a little worrisome, but it may show that, okay, I'm still trying to reach the middle of the class. I definitely have some people that are outperforming. I still have some stragglers. What are some of the techniques I might consider doing? So the item analysis and the summary descriptive statistics make it much easier for me to at least get a picture of my whole class without going to each individual test and trying to compare it to the rest of the class. So item analysis and regrading. This is if you're going into the computer companion part. And so you would go to your quizzes, because that's what Zipgrade calls them. Find the quiz or the assessment that you did. Click on that, and it will open up this report. This report you can print as a PDF. It's 3 to 4 pages long. And if you've done a customized answer sheet, you'll see that customized code. You'll see a little histogram of the performance in the class. This way you can quickly see for some classes that you might have a bimodal distribution. You have D's and F's, and you have A's and B's, and you might have like no C's, which sometimes happens in my classes. Oops. And then if you scroll down in that report, then you get the start of the item analysis. And what the item analysis will do is it'll go per question in your assessment. So for mine, they're 53 items long. What the correct letter was, the number of students. So 20 papers, there were 20 students who took the test. 17 of them answered question 1 correctly. It'll give you the percentage of students who answered it correctly. And as I mentioned before, that item analysis breakout, it will let me know the percentage of each, the percentage of students who answered each of the response options for that item. And the order of report, I've kind of listed out there. But if you are familiar with item analysis, then these tend to be more straightforward. But if you're not, this quickly helps you to figure out, well, which item, which question number on my test did students, or maybe it was too easy, like question number 2, everybody got right. Some faculty is like, well, maybe I might need to make that question more difficult. I tend to look at it that my tests tend to overall be very challenging for students. So I go at the other end. I look at, okay, which items have like 40 or 45% or less who got it correct. Those are probably the much more challenging questions or poorly worded. I have to recognize that I might have just messed up on a question. And so I look at those. And then I go and look at the response options. So for this one, question number 26, there's only 2 sets. So this tells me it was one of my true false questions. And a majority of the class picked the wrong answer. They picked true when the statement was false. I go back, I look at the question in Word, I do my judgment call. It's like, nope, I'm leaving it as is, even though a majority of students are not getting it correct. That's something I might cover again in class after the midterm. Like, okay, some of you are still struggling with this concept. I'm going to go over like why this statement was false instead of true. Whereas this one on the bottom, I have a quarter of the class that answered E. This tells me it's multiple choice. I might go back to E and go, okay, it's conceptually really close. All right, I'll give you guys the point back, but I only want to give people who answered option E the points instead of giving everybody the points back. Because I thought E was the only one that was conceptually close, that they're understanding the content. I was just too fine of a point. And again, I want them to learn the material. Option E was really close to understanding material and giving the students the points back, but not giving points to everything. And it will also tell you when someone left a question blank. And when I've gone back to questions, I've seen, okay, a certain percentage answered E. E was not part of that question. So that lets me know some of my students are just blindly filling in bubbles on the test and not really taking the test. Okay. So say for that one question, I just want to give a point or partial points back to that student. On that main page for seeing your quiz, you go to edit the answers or edit answer key. And I mentioned there's 2 options. One could be, well, because I've done this, I've keyed the wrong letter, especially with 53. It happens at least once a semester. I own up to it, say, hey guys, I keyed the wrong letter. I fixed it. Your stuff's regraded. So in that case, I would just change the letter from C to B. And at the bottom, I would say resave it, and it would regrade everybody's. If, however, I wanted to give credit back to one of those other response letters, then I click on the plus or add answer. I put in the letter, and then I put in the points. And again, at the bottom, I resave the test, and it regrades everybody's with that customized change, which I really like, because then I've, in my career, have had to go back and hand grade changes, and it takes a long time. Okay. To download your data, because I'm an Excel person, because it just, with large classes, just makes it so much easier, put the grades back into the gradebook for Blackboard. You go to classes, you find your class again, and now you click on the gradebook report, or this little icon. And it'll give you two views. One is view by percentage. You can download the percentage of questions students got correct, or you can view by score. And it's just a toggle that basically, if you click this, it'll change it to score. If you click it again, it changes it back to percentage. Okay. And so this is the screen as though you're seeing the scores, even though at the top it says view by percentage, because I said that's kind of a toggle, like it just flips between the two formats. And this is just a note at the bottom. So once I see the scores instead of the percentages, I click export to CVS. And as soon as it exports it out, I immediately save it as an Excel file. So that way the columns and all the data stay aligned. And then I typically download my gradebook from Blackboard. And because the data are sorted already by last name, I just copy and paste the scores in and then upload the gradebook back into Blackboard, and the scores are posted. That's why I mentioned to students that as soon as their assessments are done, if I'm not going to go teach a class, if I'm not in meetings, I could have their scores up potentially within an hour, if not 10 minutes. I tell them, I always look at the item analysis reports because I want to give you guys the benefit of the doubt. I want to see what the pattern is before I finalize those scores. So just a quick overview of descriptive statistics. I showed you how you can see that in the app. This is how you can see it in a more detailed format. Again, go back, open up the quiz that you want, scroll down, and there's a nice little summary table. Now in this particular one, you're going to see that someone who got 49, they probably have a percentage higher than 92.5%. This is one of my classes in which I probably give extra credit, and that's one of the downsides of Zipgrade. My regular tests are out of 50 items, but I embed 3 additional ones for extra credit because, again, I'm teaching students very low and very high. And so for those higher performing students, I want to see for a few questions if they can get those more challenging questions. But I don't want it to hinder those that are still struggling to understand the basic concepts. It's just going to distort the percentage. So in that case, I just download and look at the raw scores because that's what I'm going to be comparing it to, whereas the percentage is factoring it or dividing it out of 53 instead of 50, because I have not figured out yet how to tell Zipgrade to count it out of 50 items, not out of 53, or which items might be extra credit. But not everybody embeds extra credit into their exams.
So, Patricia, just quick interrupting question. So how do you get the grade immediately to the student if it doesn't integrate with Blackboard? Do they all have this app too?
I show them on my phone. So basically I've got the app on my phone. I line up those 4 boxes, images on their actual Scantron they filled out, and it gives me the picture of their score. You have this many points out of this, here's your percentage.
Right.
And I flip my phone to them, or I have them come to me, so I'm not showing the rest of the class. I'm like, here's your score.
Right, but To do that later on down the line, then how do you get them their score? Do you manually then go in and take the scores off of this sheet and put it into the Blackboard shell one by
Correct.
one?
No, no. I will download the Excel sheet or CSV from Zipgrade. I will download my Blackboard gradebook. And so I have 2 Excel files.
Gotcha.
I copy the column from one to the other, save the Excel file for my gradebook, and then re-upload it, and it puts the scores in.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I prefer 2 downloads, copy, paste, and upload.
Gotcha.
That I can do it like in a minute.
That makes
So-
sense. They
Yeah,
can
so
Blackboard show and see what their grade is.
correct. That's why those that want to see it later, they go to Blackboard and they can see their points.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Because again, when I have class sizes of 53, along with a lot of other challenging courses, this helps to save time. There's time, it takes time for the setup, but after that, the actual grading goes much, much more quickly, which is very helpful when I have a large class size and lots of papers and going between spring 1 and spring 2. My bigger classes that don't have papers, I can get their stuff, their final graded, finalized, which gives me more time for the more intensive papers in my upper level psych classes. So it became a time management reality or approach or thing, but then I like the tools that are in there as well. So it serves multiple purposes for me. Other questions?
Yeah, I have a question about at the very beginning, does the app provide a student specific bubble sheet for each student, or does the student have to put their name on it? How does that go?
You have the option. I have never customized it because I have students that mess up and then need a new one. So if I had a customized name on each bubble sheet, then I may not have those spare extras.
Okay.
But I have seen it that you could tailor that. I just never have used that feature. So I use the one that they write their name in. They have to fill in their ID on the bubble sheet because there are bubbles for it. Let's see if I can quickly find that image of one of the bubble sheets. There we go. Are you seeing the PowerPoint slide? Oh, I probably need to share it. Let me go back. Okay. Are you seeing the PowerPoint slide now?
Yes.
Okay. Right here, it says student ID. So I have them write their name, their date at the top. Here, I say write in your ID number and then fill in one bubble for each of your numbers. I do that because students have problems filling out bubbles. If they make an error, I've got their written ID right on top and I can fix it, rescan it with my phone, and then I don't have to follow back up with the student.
Does the app make sure that all of that is completed before it enters the information it needs?
If, for example, my student, like they wrote the wrong number, they filled in the wrong bubble,
Right.
it basically will just give me a picture of their name. So I still have their scores. It's just when I go to integrate it into or copy and paste it into Blackboard, I may have to manually put that student's score in because it's looking at a picture instead of a digital typing of that student's name.
Have mistakes ever happened? I mean, the students question whether you took the picture of the wrong thing, or, I mean, I could just imagine scenarios happening.
That's why they have on the app as well as on the computer, but if they had a question right there in class, you can review the scan. So basically literally takes a picture of each person's Scantron or answer sheet. And that way you could see, here's your name at the top. This is yours. This is the score, because it also gives you the score at the top of that image. So that way I can show students, this was your answer sheet. This is how it was scored. This is how many points you got on it. It did not mix it up with another student.
So is it beneficial to do that while the student is still, leaving from the exam so that they can see this is what you took a picture of?
You can, if that is definitely a concern with your students, you can. About half my students are like, no, I don't want to see it. I turned it in, I'm done.
Okay.
I don't even need confirmation. I will just see it later. But usually when the first year I was using it, it was a novelty. So students just wanted to see. And when they see their score, their Scantron is literally in the background of that image, but I could pull it up so they could see it much more clearly. I just use a different menu in the app.
Okay, thanks.
Kareen?
Hi, thank you, Patricia, for taking the time to show us all this. I'm wearing my academic technology hat. And so I just have a few questions related to the implementation process. So as I think everybody here is probably aware, we had a tech governance committee. Now that Adam is gone, Adam Kaler, I'm not sure if that is going to continue. But my understanding was that when we implement technology, we're supposed to go through that process. And part of what that process does is check for data privacy issues. And I just wondered if you can tell us like what student data is going where, and do the students have to agree to allow their data to go offsite?
I don't have an answer for any of that because I didn't know what the policy was here. I have talked with at least one or two other instructors and they have been using Zipgrade. I just don't know to what extent.
Here at OU?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that is definitely a gap that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
So I do not know about the data security issues. I know it has been used at bigger institutions than Ottawa, but that does not necessarily guarantee proper security measures are being taken.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that would be something that we should look into before we, go any further or other people adopt it. Another concern I have or question, I guess, is just in terms of the tech support. So another part of the data governance process is who is responsible for then fielding help desk tickets when people have questions about it. And I'm sure you're going to say, I'd be happy to help anybody who wants to learn to use this, but I know you're overloaded.
Well, they do have some tech support on the website. I just never have used it.
Okay.
Even though I have a paid membership. I'm kind of like with a lot of my students, I will do a lot of trial and error.
Sure. Yeah.
Get it to work for me because sometimes I will either watch one of their videos or read their FAQs and I'm like, but that's not what I'm particularly doing and what my particular issue is.
Sure.
So some of those things I do. So right now I'm just advocating if individual users, people wanted to use it, because I don't know if the university would do a university-wide adoption, even though I believe that is a feature on its website.
So is there another, I'm sorry, is there another system that's?
Yeah, sure. I was going to go there in a minute, but go ahead and finish, Patricia. I had some more
I just wanted to make sure I got Stephen's question in.
Oh, because are we almost out of time? Yeah. Okay. I'll try to be quick. So another aspect of vetting technologies that we adopt is making sure that they are accessible. So that would be another thing I would want to investigate, and just making sure that all students can use whatever it is that they're expected to use, and that company has gone through the process of ensuring accessibility. And sometimes color coding, for example, is not accessible to everyone. So there are just some concerns I would have before we do any kind of wholesale adoption, especially with student data going offsite. That is something we really do need to be paying attention to. And then so to Robert, I think where you were going is, do we have an alternative? And at the moment, this use case is very much a classroom-based use case. And so Blackboard does have item analysis for quizzes. So just the part about, how did students do on my questions, Blackboard can handle. But of course, you would have to be having those students do that quiz on Blackboard. So I realize that is not always convenient to your use case. So other than that, Robert, that's the only other option I can think of. And then of course, if you do develop a quiz in Blackboard, you can have them go to a lab and take it. You can have them take it on their phones. And of course, then those grades will go directly into Blackboard, and you can do your item analysis directly into Blackboard, and you can make adjustments. If you see that you put in, for example, Patricia, like you were saying, the wrong answer and students were docked for something that was actually correct, you can adjust that and it will auto adjust their grades. So there is a version of this, but it's not exactly what Patricia has shown us.
But we'll learn about that in Blackboard training. Is that correct?
We're not planning on covering quizzes and item analysis in today's session, but we certainly can.
No, but I think isn't there more official Blackboard training that I and the PA program will be learning?
We can take that offline, Robert. Possibly, yes. I mean, quizzes in general are not widely used in online courses because unless you want them to be open book, there's really no way to control those. And even more so in graduate courses, we tend to use those as self-assessments. Did I comprehend the material, but not really for a grade? Again, you can still do item analysis on those if you want to, but they are not widely used in online courses for that reason. I don't want to run out of time. The other
thing I just wanted to mention is that I do have colleagues here in Arizona that will use Blackboard so students are in the physical classroom doing their midterms and finals. However, the connections drop. And then trying to get a student back into a test during it. And it's like the Zipgrade, I never dropped.
Yeah,
I can
that's something
reliably
I hadn't
have
thought
an
about.
in-class assessment. It'll go into Blackboard later, but I don't have to deal with that kind of technical issue physically in the classroom. And I can control a lot better what technology they're also. So like put your computers away, put your phones away. And so it's basically doing a traditional in-person. It's just the actual scanning or grading is I don't know.
And Robert, we have ExamSoft anyway, I think for nursing and PA programs that's very robust. So I think we will probably be using that for your program for PA stuff.
Okay, good. So I'll be learning about that.
Yeah, down the line. Mm-hmm.
Stephen, what was your question? Sorry, it took so long to get back to you.
Yeah, Patricia, thanks for the presentation. I also appreciate this tool and the capacity that it has. So thanks for that. Corrine asked my questions just about student IDs off on another software, just had questions about security issues. So she raised the issue, so I don't have any questions.
Okay. Again, I didn't get to the assessment tags, but they are in the PowerPoint slides with, again, some screenshots with little descriptions that I hope can help people. But as Corrine had mentioned, I'm willing to answer questions, but I have had some colleagues that use other features. Like there's an opportunity to do remote testing through Zipgrade. I tried it once here and it was just more of a hassle. I'm like, I'll just go through Blackboard. So I limit the use of what I do for Zipgrade, and it's more of those kind of reducing the opportunities to cheat during exam situations.
I feel obligated to say that downloading your gradebook, making edits to it, and re-uploading it is please don't do that if you're not really an Excel champ. If you're not super comfortable with Excel, you can make a huge mess in Blackboard. So my heart went flutter when you said you download and then you merge two Excels and then you re-upload. I'm like, oh my God. Okay, so please don't attempt that without help if you're not super confident.
Yeah, because when I download the gradebook, I don't change its name. I do save it as Excel, so that way, while I'm messing with it, I do save it back as CSV before, or it's not CSV, it's .text, so .txt, so that way it's in the format that Blackboard reads things, and I've never had a problem. But yes, I definitely agree. If you're not comfortable with Excel, manually putting it in is probably the safer bet to do. But for those that have that comfortability, it's just, again, another time saving when you've got 50 different things on your plate. But if it's going to create more headaches, then find a different approach, a different system. Okay, I'm going to turn off the recording if I can remember how to do that. Or if Corrine can help me figure out, I guess it's stop recording, little box. All right.